Radio Shack? Okay.
What?
The 80s called.
Welcome to the CoCo Nation, the world's first live and interactive talk show featuring the Tandy color computer and its hardware cousins.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the CoCo Nation, episode 344. How you doing? We ready for the first presentation?
You give it a whirl.
All right, here we go.
Roll that beautiful footage.
The CoCo Nation remembers Steve Bjork.
Now, sound on the CoCo. You're going to hear this great from me probably till I die. There is no built-in sound chip.
Steve Bjork, are you with us?
I'm trying to get on. I think my headphone's not set.
The star power has just reached stellar status at this point.
Let's not go in that direction, okay? You don't know how many times I went to Tandy and begged them to put a sound chip in the CoCo. You want some good sounding games? Put it in your frickin' computer. And they kind of did that with the deluxe color computer, but it never came out.
Now, Steve, were you involved with any of the emulators?
No, except for VCC. The guy wanted to call it Bjork. I told him no way. And I try to keep my games on that bitter edge of being fun and challenging without tipping over into the frustrating level. And that my games would always kind of have, okay, you died. I will back off the difficulty just a little bit to give you a chance to kind of get your rhythm going again. My favorite programmer is tomorrow's me. You know, I'm always going to get better. That's the guy I'm shooting for. That's my favorite programmer. No, he shortened it to, who's your favorite programmer? Me. Never going to live that one down.
So a big thank you to
Yeah.
Jason for producing that clip.
I don't know if it'll take a lifetime, but I've just scratched the surface there. Really, I mean, there is so much content, and there's just, especially in the earlier days of the show, there's a lot of Steve Bjork in there, and a lot of good anecdotes, and some of them do repeat. And you know, I have to try to remember some things are going. Did he tell me that on Discord, or was that on the show? So I can actually find that particular anecdote. But there's a lot of good content. I think maybe my goal at some point in the future I would like to try to get those segments together where some of those things came together, and maybe eventually put it into some type of viewable pseudo interview type format. But that's a huge undertaking, and I don't see it getting done anytime soon. But I've just scratched the surface here and started taking some notes.
That was great, and the music was perfect, and it was just enough. So I don't know what order we're going in here. I feel like I've just hijacked the whole show, and I don't know. Am I allowed to say things? Permission to speak freely?
Well, we'll just be kind of round robining it through. I've got some codes here that were put on Facebook and put in the Discord chat and stuff too from people. So some of us have some stuff to show from magazine interviews that he did back in the day and stuff too. So it's just gonna be randomly bouncing around and remembering Steve. So there's no particular order whatsoever.
All right. So, I mean, obviously, rest in peace, Steve. We miss you. You will be lost. You are a treasure to the community, to not only the CoCo community, but to gaming and hardware and software and electronics at large. Multi-talent and his haunt hackers and things he did with Disney engineering or Imagineering. And he had his hand in so many jars and so many talents. The world has suffered a loss for sure. I am grateful for the things he made for the computer. I think his talent is completely undeniable. There are things he did in the early days of the CoCo that just haven't been done. The fact that he made audio spectrum analyzer, real-time hardware, monitoring that he had to hand assemble, which was one of the stories he shared with us. He didn't have an assembler. He hand assembled some of those early color computer carts. Popcorn was hand assembled. Audio spectrum analyzer, which is a program that still gets accolades and people are still impressed with it to this day. He did that. He had software emulate hardware. He had such a good understanding of both hardware and software. His contributions were countless. The games that he made were the games that made people want to buy the color computer because they all had a quality. There was a stamp to it. There was graphics, there was sound, there was animation, there were sprites, there were title screens. Now, granted, again, if we're going to play both sides of the fair coin, a lot of that he did with Datasoft. Datasoft was a company with a team of people that were working on a lot of platforms. So I'm sure there were a lot of shared assets and shared talent. So he didn't have to invent all the wheels, but he still put together some really impressive wheels that help sell the color computer, that help sell software. A game like Zaxxon was completely mind-blowing for its time. At one point in time, the gold standard for 8-bit was like Donkey Kong on the ColecoVision and Zaxxon on the ColecoVision. Once we got Donkey King and Zaxxon for the CoCo, it's like, Coleco what? You know what I mean? The CoCo was established as a formidable game machine that was on par with, name brand stuff that had all kinds of extra hardware. So he did things with the CoCo that had not been done at the time they were done, and everything he did had a certain stamp of quality. He wasn't the only talented programmer, even back then. Greg Zumwalt, just as prolific, made just as many games, but he was a force to be reckoned with. The mark he left on CoCo gaming and graphics and all kinds of stuff is undeniable. The other thing I want to say is that I feel honored that I got to meet him at CoCo Fest. I feel honored that he not only came on the show, but became a vital part of the show and helped shape the show and mold it into something more professional. His insight was invaluable. The fact that he became one of the guys and just hung out on Discord. The fact that he, I'm going to cry here in a second, but he created that assembly language series for the show. But I almost feel like he created it for me too, And so to have somebody who you grew up with do that for you, there it is, I'm crying. The Steve Bjork I got to meet, I feel honored that I did, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, they're well put. I mean, I'll concur on the audio spectrum analyzer. People, in the last 5 years are just stunned that he managed to pull that off with no hardware to support it, just the CPU and timing and stuff. I first got to meet Steve myself at Rainbow Fest, the very first Rainbow Fest I ever went to, actually. Bill Noble and I went, 1986 Chicago, and we got invited up on the, I think it was Saturday night, to somebody's room in the hotel at the Hyatt Regency. It was somebody we'd met, on Friday night type thing, and kind of visited during the fest. And this is when it was busy, like 14,000 people type thing. And Bill and I were talking with somebody else. And Bill and I were just getting into assembly language, like getting to truly understand it somewhat. And we were talking about, how we could optimize graphics routine. And Steve, who I didn't realize was behind us, actually was listening in the conversation. Then he just popped in. So have you guys discovered stack blasting yet? And we took a, turn to look, around who it was. Of course, we didn't know what he sounded like. But I instantly recognized him from the interview he did in the February 1984 Color Computer magazine, which I'll be showing a little bit later. I recognized his face from that. I, of course, had no idea what he sounded like, but we were just, holy crap, that's Steve Bjork. And he just went in a conversation. He taught us what stack blasting was, how it worked, and everything else. And we were just going, wow, cool. And we actually went up to our rooms on Sunday morning and tried it out, very briefly. And wow, this is really fast, type thing. So I know some people, like, he was very tight with copyrights. and trademarks, etc. too. Like he wouldn't just give away source code, but he'd give away techniques, and he did that for lots of people in the community. He did that for people on the show. He did it in the Assembly Language Programming course. People on Discord would ask questions. People on Facebook would ask questions, and he was always, really good at giving the general techniques and stuff. He wasn't going to give you like the source for Zaxxon or anything like that, but he would give you the techniques and the clues of the techniques that actually do that kind of stuff. And how prolific he was is something like, as Steve mentioned, him and Greg Zumwalt are probably the most prolific CoCo programmers for commercial products out there. And I mean, Steve lasted the entire run of the CoCo. He started, in 1981, when he first released his screen edit control system through Datasoft, the very first program that he did for them, which I'll also get into a little bit later here too as well, right up until Marty's Nightmare in 1990. A CoCo 3, vertical scrolling, Pac-Man style with some digitized voice stuff, and a tribute to Marty Goodman. I'll be getting into that story as well later for the coordinated CoCo conference call, which I'll let Tim talk about a little bit later as well too. But yeah, there's just so much stuff, and the games were fun. And like he mentioned that one little clip there that he would have the difficulty back off. Like some people programming the games back then didn't do that. So if you started dying, you just kept dying over and over again, and you just have to like beat your head against the wall until you could finally get past that point. But he backed it off to kind of tease you into wanting to do it without getting too frustrated. And I think that was a hallmark of most of his games, that he actually took that into consideration. Whereas a lot, like we always joke about the European games where they're out to kill you. That's all they're really designed to do, type thing. Yeah, I mean, Steve built up a big library of routines and stuff. So when you got the challenge for doing the Rampage port, and he was offered a bonus if he could get it done in a very limited time frame, and he did it in 31 days. So start to finish. And I know a few other CoCo programmers that did that. Ken Rogaway, who did Rescue and Fractalus and Cronus Rift, he did those in I think 8 weeks for the first one, 6 weeks for the second, and he'd never touched a CoCo before. But he had, here's all the assets and here's the source code from like the Atari version, so he had something to base it on.
How many times was Zaxxon referenced? How many different Zaxxon stories? There was when I was pulling clips, there was a anecdote he was talking about where he was at Disneyland. And I think it was around the time that Tron was being released, and they had actually set up a Flynn's arcade at Disneyland at the time.
Right.
And he was playing the Zaxxon arcade game there and was doing rather well, and kind of pulled a Flynn on him. He's like, "Well, I wrote the program," and he had stated previously, not only did he do the CoCo port, but he had also done some work helping with the arcade port, especially, or the arcade version, especially for a U.S. release. Because I guess
compared to the Japanese one, which was a fair bit different for the original release, and
had pastel colors and things. So yeah.
Just to give people an idea, if they don't fully know Steve's career, I mean, he started off he was working on Sols and some other stuff when he was a teenager, and then he started doing some Tier City Model 1 stuff. Then he got into CoCo, which was basically his living for a good span of years. And then he did some stuff on some of the video game consoles. So actually, I've kind of compiled a list here of all the stuff that he worked on that I know of, including a few that he's uncredited on. And there's a few other things that I think he was involved with, but I don't know too much about them. But I thought I'd rattle some off. So the Tier City Model 1 in 1979 and 1980, he cranked out Spaceball, which is a game, Soft Music, musical editor, Galactic Fighter, Soft Term, which I believe is a terminal program, Spaceball 2, and then Soft Video, which is kind of an animation thing. And then on the CoCo, and he did this through Datasoft and through Tandy and through SRB Software, et cetera, and GamePoint. I won't mention all the companies for each individual one, but all those ones are involved. So he did one called SECS 6, which is a screen edit control system, and that was by Datasoft. And I think this is probably a good time for me to share that particular screen so you guys can see what I'm referring to here. So if that's showing up here, this is one of the earliest Datasoft ads for stuff for the CoCo. Sigmon, now I talked to Mark Segal about these. Sigmon, I believe, is actually a Motorola product that Datasoft got permission to sell, which is a machine language monitor for developing system, but not an assembler. And then SES, if you guys remember that any of the old timers that were around when the CoCo 1 first came out, Extended Basic was delayed. And so Steve wrote SECS, the screen edit control system, which actually added a full screen editor, so you could actually edit your basic statements and stuff without having to retype them, which in Color Basic was the only way you could do it. You had to retype the whole damn line if you had one mistake in it. The edit command came with Extended Basic, and I think that actually finally got released around November, December of 1980. This ad here is from basically February of 1981 of 80 micro, but that would have been, a couple months ahead of time when it was advertised. So it didn't last too long. In fact, there's a little bit of an audio clip from the coordinated CoCo conference that I'll play where he talks about this particular program because it was needed at the time. And then, it was basically obsoleted, a couple months later when Extended Basic finally got released a little bit behind schedule.
In that ad there, is that supposed to be Steve in that little cartoon caricature there? I wonder.
I don't know. I don't think so, though, because he never wore glasses.
Oh, he never did wear glasses. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, on the CoCo, he started off with that one. And then these are roughly in chronological order, but there's some question as to specific months as to which came out first. But I'll rattle off the other ones here. So Audio Spectrum Analyzer. And there's two versions of it. There's the semi-graphics version that most of us are familiar with. And then the last few years, we actually discovered there's an updated P-Mode 4 one, which actually runs properly in the CoCo 3, but this was released around 83, 84. And I'm not sure why they redid it, because, there was no reason technically to redo it, except maybe Tandy was trying to get away from having semi-graphics officially supported, even though several other programs that they did.
If I had to take a wild guess, I'd say Brian Wiesler probably has one.
He's not the only one.
Yeah. But doesn't the cartridge look exactly the same? There's
there's no change at all.
No
the manual's not changed.
Part number or anything different.
The copyright date's not changed. Nothing.
It's like a crapshoot if you're going to get the old or the rare one, huh?
I believe Terry Steggy has one, and somebody else in the Facebook group mentioned they found out they have it too. So there's at least 3 known copies of the revised one. Popcorn, of course, Shooting Gallery, which actually has an uncredited assist on it. It's listed as being by James Grand, but and I talked to Mark about this too, just because I know Steve had claimed that he actually did quite a bit of the programming on a few of the Datasoft games, but it was looking like he was doing everything. So he decided to let the other people share the credits without having to mention him on every single one. So Shooting Gallery is one. Clowns and Balloons, Micro Painter. Now, he actually had some private versions of Micro Painter to work with both the CocoMax cartridge and the X-Pad as well, which were never released, which would be kind of interesting. Megabug, which is a port of Dung Beetles, of course, from the Apple II, and there's a third name for the Atari one. I don't know why they kept renaming it from Datasoft, but they did. Sands of Egypt, in which case it was written with Ralph Burris, James Grand, and Steve Bjork. Zaxxon, of course, the most famous one. Canyon Climber, that's another uncredited programming assist he did along with James Garron as well. Puyan, another uncredited assist, was along with James Garron and Jerry Humphrey. Stellar Lifeline, which I think is a favorite of a lot of us here. Desert Rider, which is an interesting combination of bump and jump and pole position, if you haven't played that one. And he didn't just do games. Here's one, Bjork Blocks, which is one he sold through Morton Bay Software, and this was basically a tile editor for doing graphics backgrounds and stuff, specifically designed for that. And is a utility that I know a few games actually used, game programs used to actually create their backgrounds, etc. Ghana Buana, and we'll get into a little bit on that. And I'll have Mark kind of pipe in a little bit here in the chat in here, because if you look at the binary of Ghana Buana actually on the disc, there's a hidden message in it hinting at a Ghana Buana 2. And this was news to Mark.
I think Steve had mentioned he did Ghana Buana for the Tandy 2000.
2000, yeah.
Wow. Which was, that was the 80186, short-lived PC, right?
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see that somewhere, even on an emulator. And I don't know what kind of graphics modes that thing had. I know it had like a high-res 16.
Yeah, it went up to 640 by 400 by 8 color or something, I think. It was a high, so I don't know which mode he used, but
I want to say it was 720 by, but I can't remember off the top of my head. That might have been monochrome.
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head either. Other ones he did, 1-on-1, the port of that to the CoCo. He did a bouncing ball demo for OS9 level 1, which I'll be showing a little bit later here too, because just to prove that you could do some fast graphics under OS9 if you did direct screen writes instead of running through the actual OS escape codes. Pitfall 2, Lost Caverns, which is still to this day the best use of the sound speech cartridge of anything on the CoCo game.
It's the only use of the sound on the sound speech cartridge.
Well, we've got a few. I mean, F-16 Assault does have some explosion sounds.
And sound, music. It's the only advantage of music.
A lot of them just took advantage of the voice, which was the worst part.
Which was the laziest thing to do. I hated like spending $30 on a game that said it uses speech card. No, it doesn't use the sound at all.
Player one, it just doesn't.
Right. That's almost
So-
as bad as the cover art making the game look amazing and having it be shite in the box, but then expecting anything that sounded like music just to hear that robot voice. I was like, oh man, stab my ears now.
Another one he did is he did a series of articles in Rainbow from July to September of 1986 for the high-res interface mouse drivers. So the high-res was actually announced before the CoCo 3 was. And the drivers he initially published were for the CoCo 1 and 2 to use that little box. But of course, he knew the CoCo 3 was coming out, so he's kind of secretly preparing all of us for it. And that was a collaboration. The high-res interface design itself was a collaboration between Mark Segal and Steve Bjork as well. He also did the Color Computer Artist, which is one of the first CoCo 3 drawing programs. Warp Fighter 3D, which I actually demonstrated at Boat Fest this last year and actually took some 3D glasses with it. So it's kind of a simplified version of Star Raiders or Project Nebula, but with a true 3D perspective. Mine Rescue, which is kind of the basis for Super Pitfall. It's basically the same game engine with a little bit of different play. You have to take oxygen tanks and give them to miners to rescue them. A Bash, which is kind of the precursor of Arkanoid. It didn't have the lasers and some of the other stuff that Arkanoid had, but had multi-balls and basically, various screens full of different blocks, and was also a fat binary, just like Arkanoid was, that it had both CoCo 1, 2, and CoCo 3 unique versions included. Then Super Pitfall itself came out. Arkanoid itself came out. Those are official ports. Rampage, which we talked about before, is one he completed in 31 days for a bonus. Z89, his sequel to his 1983 hit Zaxxon, except this time with the CoCo 3 and digitized sound effects. Snake Pit, which for some reason people think is really rare. I bought it from him at CoCo Fest in 89, I think it was, or maybe 1990. So it was definitely on sale. And then Marty's Nightmare, which was a tribute to Marty Goodman, and we'll get into the story behind that a little bit later here too. But that came out in 1990 for the Atlanta CoCo Fest. And then he did some other stuff after the CoCo for some game consoles. He did Crystal Quest in 1991 for the Game Boy. In 1992, he did Captain Planet and the Planeteers for the Genesis and the Rocketeer for the Super Nintendo. 1995, he did the Mask and Bassmasters Classic on the Super Nintendo. And then he also did Bassmasters Classic Pro Edition in 1996 for the Genesis. So that's just his software stuff. And then he did Haunt Hackers and a whole bunch of other stuff that I don't have, a lot of specific details on, but he kept active.
And I think he did mention something like that there were, and that's kind of why Activision got formed, because, the famous Marinette thing where he couldn't get his name on Adventure and he put in the Easter egg. And so Activision's like, we just want to get credit. And for whatever reason, the only reason why any of us knew the name Steve Bjork at the time is because his name was on the games. And so certain names were associated with quality, whereas sometimes it was just a company like Spectral Associates as a company, they're going to have a good game. That's a reputable, Mark Data, Tom Mix, they're probably got good products, but they weren't like household names. The game, the programmer wasn't always a household name, but somebody like Steve Bjork pretty much was, because his name was front and center so the name recognition with the quality product became synonymous. But apparently from what he was saying, or what you were just saying there too, you didn't always get a dual credit. So he let other people take the headline, and that's fine. I mean, at the end of the day, if he's getting paid, that's great. I can't even, and I know we've interviewed Mark Segal, and I remember listening to it, but I don't remember all the details. But I'm just trying to imagine what it would have been like being in that room in Datasoft. You know what I mean? Like all those systems they were developing for the Atari 8-bit and the Commodore and the CoCos, and they made a product that went on every single 8-bit system. What would that environment have been like? Would it have been fun? Was it's hard to imagine. And having all these other people who have talent and are making games with you and stuff, it probably was
was there a competitive rivalry between the people doing stuff for the Ataris and the TIs?
I have a feeling there had to have been a lot of collaboration, because there had to be so many shared assets and the source code and everything else, because Datasoft is a brand, and something like Canyon Climber was a title. So I would have to imagine that a lot of that. And when speaking of Canyon Climber, it's an interesting game. It's very repetitive. At some point in time, you'd say to yourself, why am I still playing this? But you want to keep coming back to it. But when you look at like the Atari 8-bit version, which had nicer colors and nice brown mountains and blue skies and had all the visual cues that we lacked, the gameplay on the Atari 8-bit blew. You know what I mean? It's just like the CoCo version just got faster and faster and faster and faster the more you play it, you know, and it just got to the point where it almost became unplayable. So if you know, nowadays they call that speed running, where you can just, you know, keep going through a game and get to so many levels in so much time. That to me was probably one of the first games that invented speed running, you know, at least the CoCo version, because I hadn't played too many other versions. But yeah, very cool stuff.
How do you speed run if you only get to level 1, Stevie?
That's the speed die, right? So
yeah, we'll ask Mark Mosley. He's the expert on level 1. So, Mark.
Yep. Just got a level 2. I'd love to see it.
Not only was he instrumental in kind of shaping CoCo Talk, but all the CoCo Talk after darks we had pretty much were surrounded by Steve Bjork and frickin' Al and his Star Trek stuff. But you know, the conversations we would have about how he somehow helped out with Jet Propulsion Labs and somehow had his hand in the making of the DVD, and it's like, wait a second, what else? What has he not done? Did he write the Bible? Steve, did you write the Bible? Did you invent the internal combustion engine? And what about the molecule? I think he was somehow influential in developing the molecule, if I'm not mistaken, right? So
he didn't get credit for that, but he helped.
I mean, you know, he's the one who started the term doorstop when referring to the MC10, which was a huge running gag for forever. That's the joke that doesn't die. And Simon Jonason is here, the madman. Hey, Simon, good to see you, mate. I mean, Simon, I love you, man. How you doing?
Yeah, but Steve,
you're a sexy beast. You're a sexy beast, Simon.
Yeah, thank you. What you're saying about that, you have to respect the guy. You know, you have to respect him for what he done.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what we're doing. Yeah.
I think Jeff Tennyson in Discord a week or so ago actually kind of summed it up really nice. You have to have some arrogance to complete projects. If you don't have enough confidence in yourself, you won't finish them. And a lot of people, you might have some technical skill, but they started and then they kind of get bored and they wander off of it, and then that's it. It just dies there. And you have to have some sort of supreme self-confidence to will yourself to go through a long, hard project. I mean, people like Nick Marentes, Simon, and others that have completed games and demos and all this kind of stuff. This is why I don't consider myself in that same plateau, because Microstein's been going on for 30 years and I'm still not done the damn thing yet. So I would mention that.
We call that maintenance.
Yeah. But he was definitely a character. He was definitely a character. I'm glad I got to meet him. Was it 2018 he came to CoCo Fest?
Yeah.
Yeah.
2018.
And so unfortunately that was the first and only time I would have met him in person, although he was on the show for a long time. You kind of felt like you knew him. And there was a moment, or I think it was on a Sunday or something, where he's like, hey, let's all go to the arcade. Let's go to the Galloping Ghost arcade. And you know, when you're at CoCo Fest, it's really hard to herd all the cats because the kittens are all over the place, right?
Mark, you got that queued up?
It's ready to go. Here we go.
Tape, Mark.
Hello, fellow CoCo enthusiasts. My name is Bruce Moore.
And I'm Jacob Moore.
And we're here to tell you our story of Steve Bjork and pay tribute to him. So I grew up with the CoCo 1 and the CoCo 2. And of course I would see Steve's name in various magazines over the years, especially on the game Zaxxon. Oh, if I could have had Zaxxon. I could never afford any of these things. Never did have a Steve Bjork game at the time. Fast forward to 2018, we came to CoCo Fest at Heron Point. Jacob and I set up a booth there, and we're kitty corner to us was somebody setting up some non-CoCo stuff. It was like, what is this? Like Halloween stuff or something. Haunt hackers, it said. Turns out it was Steve Bjork. I was like, whoa, that is pretty cool. The Steve Bjork guy right beside us. The guy who made Zaxxon and apparently a whole bunch of other games. Like Megabug, which I happen to own now. Yay. So, Jacob was, in 2018, how old were you?
Oh, I would have been 10.
Okay, 10 years old. So he's a sweet little guy. And it seems that Steve took a bit of a shine to Jacob. And I believe that started at the auction. So Jacob had maybe $30 available to him for bidding. I wanted him to have fun with the bidding. And there was this item that was donated, iCade it was called. It was a Bluetooth arcade controller that connected to an iPad, and it had a bunch of games built in it. Oh, he desperately wanted this thing. And he bid, and he bid, and he bid, and then it just went beyond his money. And I was going to let him learn a hard life lesson there and not jump in and keep bidding. And so it was sold to somebody when the bid went up a couple more times. Jacob's kind of sad. And then this fella gets up and comes over and gives it to Jacob. And Jacob's sitting there with this in his hand, this iCade in the box, like with this dumbfounded look on his face. Just sitting right next to us is Steve Bjork. He's watching all this. And the guy goes back and sits down, and Jacob pops up unprompted and goes over there and thanks the guy profusely for it. Steve Bjork watches that, and he turns and looks at me and says, there aren't too many kids who would bother to have done that. You know, that's a good kid you got there. Of course, I'm feeling very proud about it and all that. So Steve thought that Jacob was seemed to be a pretty good kid. So we go forward a little bit further, and we're going through around all the tables, and we come to Cloud 9, Mark Marlette. He's got all those cartridges there. We find a Rampage cartridge there. See, Jacob, this is like one of the best CoCo 3 games. It's based on the arcade game, and guess who ported it? Steve Bjork. So he was very keen to put his money that he didn't have to pay on the auction towards getting that cartridge. And where is that cartridge, Jacob?
Right here.
Right here. So this cartridge, once he got it, I said, Jacob, you know, the guy who coded that is here. Why don't you go ask him for his autograph?
La versión para la color computer del Rampage. Y bueno, ahora se va a poner de moda porque está la película
Thanks, Steve. Jacob, show it here. Show it to the camera. Show it to the camera. Show it to the camera. Yeah.
You do some damage.
There are a lot of practices.
There are certain ones that you want to use.
We're like they're in Ghostbusters now. We've got 3 streams going on.
What the?
He's got to step on the thing now and suck in the ghost.
Jacob's getting all the cheats on Rampage here from the man.
No fair.
But the thing is, if you go find an arcade game, you're going to be a leg up after playing that one for a while because it is really based on arcade game.
But Steve was very gracious. He went and found a proper felt pen, and he signed it and warned Jacob not to smudge it because it was going to be wet for a while, so we put a little piece of tape over it to try and keep it from smudging. And Jacob was very thrilled to have this autographed copy of Rampage. So we go forward a little bit later. There's some guys who have been talking about going to the Galloping Ghost, which was a big arcade that had all the original arcade console games in there. And so the night had come, and we came through the lobby, and there was, always some guys hanging in the lobby there. Steve Bjork was there. And we said that, hey, we're going to go, and we've got, lots of room in the back of our rental car if anybody wants to catch a ride. And people were hemming and hawing. They weren't sure if they're ready to go or if they wanted to go or who was going. So we chatted for a little while, and then it says, okay, well, we're on our way. So as we're walking out, this voice pipes up behind us, saying, hey, I think I'll catch a ride with you. It was Steve Bjork. It's like, okay, sure, come on, Steve. So he hopped in the back of our car, and away we drove, and as we're driving along, he told us some stories. Like when he got his driver's license, so he would have been 16, which is your age right now. Jacob just got his driver's license. So when he was Jacob's age right now, he would, on Fridays, skip school, take his parents' car and drive, I'm not sure if it was up the coast or down the coast, to the Homebrew Computer Club to see what was going on there. And as he's telling this story, I'm thinking, Homebrew Computer Club? Wait a minute. Isn't that Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, did you meet Steve Jobs? He says, well, he was there. He was, he always kind of wandered around the background. He didn't say much, but he was always kind of paying attention to stuff. And he said that, he found Steve Wozniak way more interesting. All the hardware tinkering and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, what? Okay, so we're getting the down low on a different era of computing, straight from somebody who's been there. It was, I was pretty thrilled. And every once in a while, I'm saying to myself, Steve Bjork's in the back of my car. What? When I told us stuff about being being extras in movies in California and like surfer music. We kind of got that stuff. So we arrive at the Galloping Ghost, and as we go in, wouldn't you know, one of the big consoles just within sight on the side is Rampage. And as we go up to pay our fee to get in, of course, Steve, makes sure he tells the guy taking the money that, hey, yeah, I'm the guy who programmed it for the CoCo 3. So the guy was suitably impressed. Oh, I wish the owner was here. I would introduce you to him, and yada yada. So anyway, Steve got his little bit of fame there, and then he headed over to the Rampage. He said, Jacob, come here. And so and it's a 2-player in this case, and so he fires it up, and he starts playing Rampage with Jacob. And then he starts telling him all the tips and tricks, like
all the little features and secrets and all that.
Yeah, and ways to not die, maximize your score, the whole bit. So Jacob got the inside scoop on the CoCo version, which of course he tried to make as much like the arcade version as possible. So CoCo Fest is over. We're back home. Jacob's rampaging all over the place. And he's like, I want to get the world high score. Now, we haven't been able to find what the world high score is. It's in a Rainbow magazine somewhere, I suppose, or maybe the Game On Challenge. I don't know. If any of you guys could find it, please let us know. Because Jacob was playing, and of course, it takes a pretty long time to accumulate a huge score. So we turned the monitor off in between, the monitor which I used for other things. Well, after 4 or 5 days of this, I made a mistake. Jacob what score were you at that point?
Oh, I think about 4 million.
Yeah, Jacob's around 4 million points, and the monitor's off. And of course, we all know there's no power light on the CoCo. So I thought it wasn't on. I didn't know he was playing, and I unplugged it and moved it. Totally wrecked his score. So right now, currently he has 4 million. But if anybody could find out what the world record is, Jacob is quite prepared as a tribute to Steve Bjork to take all those tips that Steve gave him and beat that and set the score on the CoCo at least for Rampage.
Jacob, would you please tell our viewers, would you please pass on at least one of the tricks that Steve Bjork told you about Rampage?
I'll tell you, it has something to do with having more than one controller hooked up.
More than one controller. And that's all you're going to say?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. Well, see, you got one there and one there. But there's something tricky about that, eh? Okay, well, you viewers, you can try and figure that out yourself.
Thanks.
Bye, all. Cut.
Are we done?
I guess.
Okay.
So big thank you to Jacob and Bruce for supplying that. They were hoping to be here, but unfortunately they're pretty sick. So
I think that kind of echoes what I was saying, how Steve definitely became one of the guys with the CoCo community. And I think he was before, because you mentioned earlier, Curtis, that there were these calls that they were doing, these Skype calls. And I know Tim Linder was part of that too. Before there was a CoCo Talk, before there were podcasts and stuff, there was a handful of group calls, these Skype calls that I think are recorded and archived somewhere. And Steve was part of those. So, he went to computer clubs all the time for different systems. And I think about one of his most infamous lines was, I've seen some of the stuff from the computer clubs that's going on the Amiga, and they got nothing on the CoCo. I knew that's another big controversial statement he had said at one point in time. I think somebody took that sound bite and posted it and called it the great lie. Like he basically, Steve lied to us. He made us buy a Color Computer 3 because he said it was better than the Amiga. Chew on and spin it how they want to spin it. But I think if you're going to a computer club and you see a demo at a computer club made by a computer enthusiast, and what he saw in those demos probably wasn't stacking up to things he knew he could do on the CoCo 3, it wasn't a false statement. And the things that we're doing now on the CoCo 3 with the transcodes and everything else, and dare I even say like Nitrous 9, you know what I mean? The things the CoCo 3 is doing is he didn't lie. The CoCo 3, it's hard to hold a candle to the CoCo 3 being an 8-bit system, So he didn't lie to us, contrary to some people's opinions.
Yeah. I also want to mention too, like he was active in the community even before the conference, which took place in 2010, 2011, which I'll let Tim get into shortly here. But he was also very active on Delphi and CompuServe in the CoCo and the OS9 groups both, from the early 80s on. He was always answering questions and helping people out with tips and tricks, and very active. Some of that stuff's been archived from the 90s, so you can actually visit those. I've actually got a chunk of them once from CompuServe on my website. If you want to go through, you'll see his name pop up numerous times. So he was always kind of helpful in the community, just, whenever he could. But he's also very strict on copyrights, and he definitely didn't want his stuff pirated, and we'll get into that. There's actually a clip I'll be playing from one of the CoCo conferences with when Marty Goodman was the guest interviewee on that one. They actually talk about the first meeting, which had a big stink about the Zaxxon and copy protection breaking and stuff like that.
And so that infamous rivalry turned into an amazing friendship that lasted forever. But and you having again only virtually met Marty Goodman one time, but another person who kind of was infamous and larger than life through people's recounting of things. And then having him on that interview was great. And Marty's whole thought was, listen, if I paid for something, I should have the right to make a backup, and that's valid. But he's also basically showing people how to, make illegal copies. And as we all know, none of us did that back in the day. We all paid for everything and respected that. So, but Marty's idea behind that wasn't to beat the system and scam and steal software, but sharing that information opened that door, and so and which would cut into some revenue for the people involved in the production of that thing. So I can see why you would be upset by that.
Yeah, I've got a 5-minute clip where actually they're both Steve and Marty are talking about this specifically. But before I do that, I wanted Tim to kind of talk about the CoCo coordinated conference. How did that start, and how did Steve become involved? And I think Aaron was the other guy that was kind of co-funding, wasn't it?
Yeah, Aaron Wolf. Well, Aaron Wolf and I don't know how it started. Actually, I remember hearing about some ham radio conferences that were done on the with the topic of the color computer, and I think Aaron is a ham operator. I think he was involved with that, and I wasn't. I've never been a ham. But one day.
Don't kid yourself, Tim. You're a huge ham.
Yeah, you never been a ham radio enthusiast, but ham.
Okay.
So I thought, opening that up to more people would be fun, and I heard about Skype, and I talked to Aaron, and we got together, and we decided to host some Skype calls, and we made an announcement, gave a time and a date and a thing, and gave it a stupid name, and we just started recording them, and that's how it started.
And I think you should preface this. This is the early days of Skype when Skype was audio only.
Yes.
Yeah. Because now when you hear Skype, you're thinking video call, you're thinking Zoom, all these things. It was audio. So I remember listening to you guys all had to say who you were. Oh, by the way, this is Tim, and I need to say this, and this is Steve, and I need to say that. So you guys were kind of annotating who you were before each sentence, because it's all audio. You know what I mean? Which I thought was interesting. And when I heard some of those back in the day, I'm like, man, this is the grandfather of CoCo Talk. You know what I mean? It's just people talking about the CoCo. It's freaking cool.
Yeah. And the audio thing was kind of fun too, because I remember listening to the episodes, and I won't play that particular part of it, but at one point, because you couldn't see a visual cue that somebody else was wanting to speak, you'd have to say whatever you're saying, then go over. Pass it over to the next one.
Like on the radio.
Like a CB radio.
10-4. What's your 20?
Yeah, I don't think it multiplexed very well. So if you didn't do that kind of thing, nobody would be able to understand anything.
Now, I noticed when I was going through them, there were 6 episodes. Is that correct, Tim?
That sounds about right.
The first 3 you were hosting, and Steve was kind of a co-host, but then the last 3, Steve was hosting pretty well solo. I know the first one that he hosted solo, he'd mentioned that you had gotten really busy at work. Is that what happened? Why you didn't do much on the last 3? Or
I don't recall.
Okay. Anyways, 2 clips I kind of highlighted here. One was about that SECS, Datasoft's first commercial program, which I showed the ad for before. It's just like a 1-minute clip, so I'll play that first, and then we'll play about a 5-minute clip where Steve's talking with Marty Goodman. It's the first time they've talked in quite a few years. So
I think Tim put that together for us. You arranged that Marty interview, didn't you, Tim?
Way back.
The one we did,
yeah.
something that was called SEX. It was something like System Extended Control System or something like that. They liked the names where it came out, SEX. I don't know why. It was basically an enhancement to the BASIC, similar to what you got with Extended Color BASIC, because at the time when the color computer came out, it didn't have Extended Color BASIC. It only had the original BASIC. So we went through, gave it high-resolution graphics. We gave you a screen editor, a bunch of other stuff. You load this thing in from tape and would use up some of your RAM and give you these extra capabilities.
So anyway, that was his little talk about that. And I'd never even heard of the program before that particular episode. And then, I much later, hunted down ads and stuff for it. So that's like going into the very early history of the CoCo one. And then I'll switch to the other one. This will be about 5 minutes with Marty Goodman. This is from the middle of the interview. I was talking about the first time they met and the little bit of controversy over Zaxxon at the West Coast Computer Fair, by coincidence.
Don't forget to share
Probably
did you come through there, that brief little clip?
Yeah, I hear it, yeah.
Okay.
The third annual or fourth annual West Coast Computer Fair. Anyways, Datasoft for the first time was going to have a booth at the show, and they're premiering Zaxxon and all these other games that they've created, and they were very excited about sharing what they had, a fully licensed version of Zaxxon and what we were able to get on the machines. Well, I hadn't been able to get up there yet, but on the first day of the show, I got a call from my boss and the head of the company, and he was outraged by the unbelievable gall this person had to take a photocopy sheets of how to break Zaxxon's copy protection and put them next to the color computer that was demonstrating it at the booth. Could not believe it. He's reading back these instructions to me saying, will this break this? And I'm kind of going, I'm shocked by have somebody broke it already, because the game had only been out in the market for about 2 weeks. And anyways, I have some friends that run some of the different computer societies, and especially the Color Computer Society, and I had them track down who would do such a thing. And sure enough, they came up with the name Marty Goodman. Now, I had never heard of Marty Goodman before, but they were saying, oh, well, he's really a good guy and like that. And I find out a little, they told me a little bit more. First of all, he was a card-carrying communist at the time, and he lives in Berkeley, belongs there. He's definitely part of that culture.
That interests me, Steve, and I certainly don't deny it. I'm proud of my leftist background and my current leftist position. But it's interesting that was put forward in the first breath as a description to me. I'm delighted to hear it, but I didn't realize that was being talked about in the world of the color computer.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was just, they were trying to explain who is this guy that would put how to break the copy protection for a game at the company that's trying to sell the game that put the copy protection in the first place. Anyways,
that was sort of more an expression of my own personality, that I didn't really want to hurt anybody, and in fact that's why I chose to put it there, where of course it would be immediately spotted, folks would know about it. I assumed it would be immediately taken away. The idea was not to harm, the idea was to perform a grand jest.
The grand jest, and I do understand, it's that everybody has the right to make sure their software works forever. If what happens to this one disk if it breaks? I understand completely. But
you were very good about that. Candidly, you brought me around over the course of the next year or two or three. Well, actually, I think it only took a couple of years to appreciate what's involved in making software and what's involved in making your living making software and all of that. And frankly, my own feelings about all that shifted considerably in large part through my acquaintance with you.
And anyways, there's a little bit more to the story. Before I met Marty and before I got up there, I started finding out more about Marty. And of course, I was a little upset, to say the least. And I said in jest to my friends, I'm going to send the Luigi brothers up there to explain life to Marty. Probably having something to do with his knees being, kind of cut off there.
You mean
Any-
the famous Sicilian orthopedic surgeon Luigi?
Yes, well, Luigi Brothers. It's two guys.
Ah, I
They
see.
make sure the job is done right. Anyways, I don't know if Marty took it literally or if Marty realized that somebody was mad. But for the first day or two when I was at the West Coast Computer Fair, when he got a clue that I was in the area, from what I understand from my spies, you were doing your best to avoid me for a little while.
I was trying to check out the situation. I didn't know what the hell kind of a character I deal with. I knew you had reason to be less than feeling really warm to me.
But we finally did meet and we did talk, and I got a kick out of the fact that you were starting to think the Luigi Brothers were real. But since
I was
then,
concerned about your ire, and folks have been known to express ill will in some fairly strong ways.
True. But, still, we managed to become great friends. I had some great times when I'd come up to the San Francisco region. You have invited me on your infamous 3-week hikes, which I have always declined.
You should have gone on one of them. You would have loved it.
I would have loved it, but I have to admit, my hiking I usually keep to nothing more than one overnight. And these days, I enjoy the comfort of a Regency so much I just can't stand roughing it anymore. So
Anyway, that's the clip I wanted to share there, kind of getting into the history of how the two of them met.
That sounds like classic Steve and classic Marty from the Marty I got to meet one time on our show. It sounds like those personality types have not changed in 40 years. And I'm grateful for both of those personalities. What a hoot that was.
Yeah, I think that's really a lost CoCo game concept there, the Luigi Brothers. I think that's you're looking for Marty Goodman.
Yeah, are those recordings available anywhere for people to get? Because I wouldn't mind listening to them again. I know
The first three are on Tim's site.
Okay.
If Tim can dig out the link, because I don't have it handy here for later on to pop in the chat here. But the first 3 episodes he's got on his site, and the last 3 I think I got copies off Nick, so I'll have to get those. I don't know if you have those, Tim, or not, because you weren't directly involved with those shows, but I can send them if you want to make the complete collection available on your site.
I'll have to check and see what I have.
I want to mention the chat to Doug Maston said, I have limited contact with him, but admire his programming skills even to this day. I even disassembled Zaxxon to learn how to write games. And Doug's our guest next week for writing Contras for the CoCo 3, which is a rather landmark title as well. So thanks for the comment there, Doug, and we'll see you next week.
You guys are talking about signatures, and one of the things that I've really enjoyed in my collection here is Nightmare Highway. And it's both
Highway.
or not, Marty's Nightmare, sorry. But
Marty's Nightmare.
But it has both Steve and Marty's signature on it.
Oh,
So
awesome.
So
awesome.
kind of,
Oh man, I didn't get Marty. He was.
I've got you beat. I've got a floppy disk signed by David Ladd.
Oh.
Oh, really? I thought Marty's was kind of interesting there. The G is kind of a snake-looking.
Yeah, he spent a lot of time drawing that, didn't he?
Is that a hammer and sickle?
Or did he have a stamp?
Damn card-carrying communist.
I think that one of the most funny things was like when I presented a demo at it was some what was it, assembly, Tandy assembly, where it was real-time vectors, real-time wireframe vectors on an MC10, and Steve Bjork was none too impressed.
Well, he should have been.
I mean, just
you muted, Simon.
I'm not muted now, am I?
No,
you're back on, but you were talking there, and you were muted at the time.
Yeah, sorry, I'm kind of drunk. It's late at night. I'm kind of drunk.
Cheers.
So it's not early morning there, is what you're telling us.
Yeah, it's like 9:15 at night. But,
so anyway, before I get back on to showing some of the other, like his interviews and stuff from the magazines, etc., I just wanted to kind of go through the panel here. Like, I know not everybody here got a chance to meet Stevie. Some of us old timers did, obviously. But a lot of you have played his games or used some of his software, and I was just kind of, if we could kind of like round robin, go through everybody here on the panel, and people in the chat can join it as well. What was your favorite Steve Bjork game or program? It doesn't have to be CoCo. If you played some of it, the Genesis and Game Boy and whatever stuff, you can include those as well. But I was wondering, going around the round table here, what was your favorite game?
I have a very quick comparison to that. So in 92 Fest, I guess, I talked to Steve very briefly. He wasn't very impressed by me, but he did sign.
Mark, can you zoom out Rick's screen? He's actually showing some manuals and stuff from some of the games.
Okay, as soon as I can find them.
He's got the four software
there we are.
covers in there.
I was looking
Ken
for the
Reichert
beard.
Ken Reichert says his favorite was the talking skull he had at CoCo Fest 2018.
So yeah, he sold this little bundle at I think the 92 Fest.
Okay.
And I spoke to him briefly. He signed my thing. I never could catch Marty. He was doing his own Marty's Nightmare, running away as fast as I could chase him. So I never got that signed.
I've got a hardware problem.
Exactly. Oh yeah, we could actually don't tempt me. Don't tempt me.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, because Steve actually digitized his own voice for all the little sound or voice clips that are in this game.
Here we go. So anyway, besides that, we also have let's see, a little bit of a popularity contest. Did this change? Come on, change your stroll. Here we go. Go this way. So the kids liked Bash and Mine Rescue, as witnessed by the dirty fingerprints on the top.
Yeah.
The adults preferred Z89 and Marty's Nightmare, mainly because Marty's Nightmare was a Pac-Man that didn't follow any known Pac-Man patterns, so we could really crush the people who thought they knew everything there was to know about a Pac-Man type game. But basically, that's my whole Steve story. I met him, I talked to him. He didn't think I was very very capable. Imagine that. But it was fun. And
did you tell him you were waiting on parts for a project?
Yeah, I probably did, because at the time I probably was. So anyway, yeah, Marty's Nightmare. It was fun.
Okay, who's next on the panel? I don't know. Are we seeing the same order? Yeah, let's go on to Ron. Ron DeVoe. We didn't talk to you yet, and you're actually first on the list here. So, what's your favorite?
Well, let me share my screen here. There's my favorite right there.
Audio Spectrum Analyzer.
Yeah, what a winner.
Yeah.
And that's the original semi-graphics version.
Yeah. And one of the things he said was what he demoed this with was the Main Street Parade soundtrack. So that was the software that was used to demo this to corporate to get it on the market or something like that.
And it made a guest appearance on the Knight Rider card, didn't it?
And in Revenge of the Nerds, the original Revenge of the Nerds, when they're doing their concert. And
this was his comment that he made that I brought to fruition.
The doors
in my front door. And he wouldn't sign, like I say, wouldn't sign
He wouldn't sign the MC10 because it killed the deluxe color computer.
That's right. And I had noticed a while back that there were
different title
versions.
screens. Yeah, some had graphics, some did not.
Yeah, thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
And what else do I have here? This came up. He was at this California Expo. His name is listed in here.
Yeah.
And then what else did I have? That's about it. I have a picture of him on my since I shared the screen, I could probably go to my this here.
Do we have any screen sharing music to play while we wait here?
What it was like at the Rainbow Fest '84. I took a bunch of pictures of Rainbow Fest with my Yashica camera.
We're not seeing them yet.
Yeah, we're not seeing that right now. We're still seeing the audio spectrum.
Let's see.
Maybe stop the share and share again.
The screen is paused. It says at the top. Well, why would that be?
Stop sharing and to reshare.
Okay. Do I have to do that? And gosh, what would I pick here? Okay. You see it?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, this was a table. There was a hard drive here, I think. And back in the day, this is 84, and to see a hard drive was cool.
Yeah.
For sure. And
especially an external one.
yeah. And this was just looking across while I was watching somebody talk. And I don't know who these guys are, but I just took the picture. Also,
Who
this
are these
picture,
people?
I think
That's Dale Puckett on the left. A guy on the right with his back facing us is Lonnie Falk.
yeah.
Wow, Lonnie.
And this guy, do you know?
Is that Roger Krupski, the guy from Owlware? Not
Maybe.
sure.
And Curtis
I
is a
thought they
walking
were
historian.
important. I didn't bother him. I just went drive-by photo. Naturally, I found this license plate out in the parking lot. And this I just
Steve
found
in the
recently.
background.
That's Steve,
at
yeah.
Tim. Yeah, he was giving a talk.
Looks like he had a little bit of a fro back then.
Well,
He always had a little bit of a fro, didn't he?
I got another
We'll
picture
see that when I show you the Color Computer interview, Color Computer Magazine interview.
And this was on sale at the show. You couldn't get these this cheap. I don't know if they had a special shipment or whatever. And
Oh,
also
sweet.
seeing this TV is interesting because
That's the original Tandy color
Yeah.
monitor, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind having one of those.
this is a buddy that went at the same time I did, and he was at my computer, club. And actually, this guy that I just showed, he's the his uncle was the.
There's Lonnie right there on the right,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
Lonnie on the right.
exactly. Yep. I don't know if that's him also in the picture, but I have a
He
couple.
did have a
of
stash for a little bit, so it could be.
What a time capsule this
This
is.
was Chicago, and I think this is Lonnie talking. Maybe I'm not sure.
What a
As you
time
can see, I
capsule.
wasn't real good with my Electro 35 camera, but yeah, there was monitors here.
Is that the
looks like
New York
another-
Times unit on top of that CoCo there that's plugged into it?
Maybe
Okay.
a dot matrix,
Matrix
printer.
printers, 99, Jason, 99.
They had show
Yeah.
specials. Look at
Yeah.
this 10 meg drive was gosh, I don't know, 19.
It was at least $1.
Yeah.
It was at least $1. I'd buy it for $1.
I'd buy that for $1.
Here's somebody making some, business. These are drives that are opened up on their case. Drive enclosures you could buy.
Oh,
Yeah.
And this is Marty, I think.
No,
Rosen.
that's Bob Rosen.
Bob Rosen, that's his name. Yeah. I got to meet him, and I shook his hand and looked at his stuff and bought a couple of things. And this guy,
Don't recognize him off the top of my head.
Is that Cheech or Chong? I can't tell.
I can't see what
don't know, but
it's advertising ADOS. That could be Art Flexor. I don't remember
Yeah,
what Art
maybe it
looks
is.
like.
but I did use ADOS for sure. That's why I took that picture. This machine here is a PT210.
Teletype?
And somebody put a CoCo in it.
Stuck a
And it
CoCo
had-
in it.
Yeah.
Inside the case of a teletype?
Yes, and at the time I saw that, I thought it was unusual because you always hear repacks in PC
Yeah.
cases or
Yeah.
in something else. But this is it.
That's a
And
cool repack.
I remember Steve Bjork coming over to me, next to me, looking at this thing, and I was saying, "Is this yours?" He goes, "No, I wouldn't do anything like that." And I didn't realize who he was until later. But I asked Steve when I saw him at the show at the CoCo Fest if, do you remember this, the PT210? And he goes, "No." I said, "Are you sure you were there looking at it?" And he goes, "Well, you remember, but I don't at all." I said, "Okay." And I kind of felt bad, but
He says, I'm a software guy. I don't care about
yeah, it was like I knew nothing. I don't know who some of these other.
Oh my
guys
God, look
are.
at that
I
chick
figured
with the freaking scarf thing. She looks like a damn flight attendant. I mean, that
this
is
is
like,
84. So
That's
Yeah.
the 80s, yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
So is that like an ascot or something?
That was still happening in '86 when I was there too.
and
Yeah.
this is my wife.
Oh, she's just as lovely
and
today,
there's-
Ron.
Yes, and there's Lonnie again.
Lonnie
I got
again.
to talk to him a little bit, and a lot of the times he was engaged with people. It was hard to get him to talk to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, the most talking Bill and I did with him was on an elevator ride.
Did you tell him about that time you hooked up all those printers and you saved the world by using the CoCo 3 and OS9?
Gary,
There's
There's
Steve.
Steve.
There you go. Look at that mustache.
Yeah, and I
What a
wish I could
gangster.
see what was on his shirt, or but maybe that's the name. of
Actually,
his
in that
company
picture there, he looks
logo.
like one of the Guido brothers that would break some kneecaps.
Yeah.
With a frickin'
Right.
That's probably why Marty
jacket
was
on
so
him.
nervous.
So I thought that was a unique picture and something I could contribute to today's thing.
That is classic. That
Yeah.
is great. That's golden right there, Rob.
Right, he's got some guns there and everything. Yeah. Look out.
Yeah, that's about it. That's me. This is what I would have looked like at the show. Was our own computer fest.
That
and
was
this
the one you did in the
probably a year
mall, right?
later. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All
You know
right,
how to
so-
party, Ron. Ron brings Cocos to the mall. He knows how to party.
That's right. So that shirt that Steve was wearing was almost a Hawaiian shirt.
Yeah,
Almost.
Right.
It reminded me of
the precursor
Now, one
for
thing
Ken.
I obviously wasn't. I'm sorry, Jason. I cut you off. Go ahead. Go ahead, Jason.
I was just pointing to Ken's Hawaiian shirt.
Oh, okay.
Never stopped me before.
There was an event that I heard about that Steve went to when they were showing off Desert Rider, and he was like, they had a real dune buggy type vehicle ATV there at that event, and he was like, he rode in on that or sat on that and posed for.
I have pictures of that.
Do you? Okay. Remember hearing about that? That's
Yeah, he was part of the Color America Users Group, is what they renamed it. They were just called the whatever computer club before that. But you'll actually notice they're part of the credits on Desert Rider. If you look, it says Steve Bjork and the Color America Users Group.
Oh, neat.
So they helped to design it. But I just want to get a couple things in the chat here. Fred Provancha says my favorite Steve Bjork game was probably Super Pitfall. I played that game a lot. Beat the game a few times, got a high score up in the millions somewhere. And then 8-Bits in the Basement says, for me, I think Stellar Lifeline I like best. I didn't know Steve did it until he said it on the show, but the 3-ball bouncing sample code he wrote for the assembly tutorial taught me loads. And of course, that's the tutorial he did for us. So.
Yeah, I just had a flashback too to how we got him on the show, right? So there's that famous misquote where he did that interview, and the headline was "My favorite programmer is me," right? And then somebody shared that on Facebook, and that conversation started circling. There it is, playing around. Look at that. And that conversation came back up, and then that's when Steve replied on Facebook saying, "Yeah, I hate that because they misquoted me." And then I remember I immediately responded saying, well, we would love to have you on the show and give you full control over anything you want to say, so nothing can be misquoted. So I immediately tried to jump on that. And then one time he's in the chat when we're doing the show, and I'm like, oh my God, Steve Bjork's in the chat. Oh, that's so cool. And then I'm like, well, now he's seen the show. He'll never be on the show. Right? and then next thing you know, he comes on the show one show. And that was just like the beginning of that relationship. And, that whole thing started by somebody reposting that picture on Facebook and trying to establish that opportunity to get that, that would be a big get to have somebody like Steve Bjork on our little show,
Yeah, and we tried numerous times. It just never panned out. And I think at the end, the last couple of times we tried, I think his health, like he had trouble with his eyesight and stuff. He ended up getting cataract surgery and things, and he just didn't feel he was up to doing it. And I think he was hoping he was going to get better, but obviously that never happened.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that the reason why I even found out was that I guess the minute that auction, that estate sale went on Facebook, because I'm not like watching Facebook. I'm barely watching Facebook, and I'm definitely not watching CoCo Facebook. But I got Antonio Jimenez had texted me, and he goes, "Hey, do you know anything about Steve Bjork? Because there's his estate auction. Do you know if he's passed or not? And do you have any phone numbers for him?" I'm like, no, I don't know anything. So of course I start looking and I see it, and of course then I call Curtis and I start talking to Curtis. I'm like, dude, what's going on? And Curtis is like, well, we'll start trying to find out. And so when we're all trying to speculate, has he passed away? Did he not pass away? Because nobody had heard from him in a while. He used to be on Discord and then kind of went MIA. There was a lot of speculation, but we're not sure. He had mentioned that a lot of things got robbed from storage, and maybe this is his storage that's now put on sale. But I couldn't help but think there's no way Steve would let his stuff end up in an estate sale if he had any say in that matter. So I don't know what happened with his health, but obviously something must have went south quickly, because the things he had, the source code for the Last Ninja, his original CoCo, and he talked about all his cross development systems and his Model 1, all these things. There's no way he would just let that end up on auction. So
he even stated in July of 2021 that he was planning on willing all of his stuff to Glenside.
Okay.
But obviously, whatever happened to his health happened fast enough that he couldn't do it. I know he had mentioned too that he had had cataract surgery because basically he was legally blind at that point. He couldn't
Okay.
see the screen. That's why he didn't show up in Discord, because he couldn't see what he was typing. But we'll have to give a big thank you to Eric Canales of the Glenside Computer Club, because he's the one who ultimately found out what happened. And then he actually created an obituary for him, because there was no obituary. He died way back in April. And
yeah,
He
tragic.
died just before our show, our CoCo Fest.
yeah, and none of us had any idea.
Well, Steve, Mr. Bjork was a very private person, and obviously, right there to the end, he didn't even have an obituary. So I'm not.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
he didn't like to talk about his health, and he didn't want any health issues he had being, just openly talked about, which you could respect. I can respect that.
I mean, a few of us knew some of it from when he showed up in the pre-show chats and stuff, and you'd kind of mentioned, he was doing like when we were trying to set up the interview, and he was hoping, because of some of his medical conditions at the time, that he just didn't have the energy for it. And then, of course, his eyesight was going, so he couldn't even see the screen to type stuff in or anything. So
On the 13th CoCo Talk, when he first started his talk, he said that his voice would run out or get lower as time went on. So he asked, if you could just bear with him. So maybe that had something to do with.
I'll just say it again. I am grateful I got to meet him.
because at this point he's still working at Datasoft, you guys, who wasn't doing some of his independent stuff. So but yeah, this is the famous squad picture here, and these are all kind of staged. And this was with the Color America Users Group, which actually the article mentions, I think, at the bottom here, that they just renamed the group as this was being written.
Okay.
LACCUG, the LA Color Computer Users Group, is now called the Color America Users Group. And like I said, you can see their credit on Desert Rider. And he kind of goes through a little bit of his history and stuff here with Datasoft and the CoCo. Definitely go read it. This is on the archive under Color Computer Magazine. Just get the February 1984 issue. You can go through. I'm not going to read the whole thing here, obviously. But it's a pretty good one. And here you can see this dash where they cut the word out that he said he actually did say on the interview, and they kind of shortened to that. But yeah, it gives some details on programming and some of the games he wrote, and it's a good article. I mean, he was not happy with this quote. This is the one that he said he'd never lived down.
Yeah.
Clickbait.
And it wasn't quite what he said, according to him. So
yeah. And I remember before we ever met him and before he ever came on the show, you had found some other archive of some interviews he did where he was talking about the light pen. And I remember
for the Model 1.
There was one night where I think it was you, me, and Nick Marentes, and we're doing like a dramatic reading of this thing with him talking about the light pen, and it was hysterical at the time. I had never met the guy or anything, but it was an interesting article. And he's just talking about how he learned in order for him to learn software, he had to learn hardware. And back in the early days of computers, not a lot of people knew things. So there was a lot of figuring stuff out, but he made a light pen. He'd made the high-res joystick interface. So, he was no stranger to the soldering iron and making stuff, hardware stuff too. And obviously, in order to do all the games, you have to understand the hardware pretty well, because he did a lot of stuff with white noise generation, like those explosions and Zaxxon and stuff like that. I mean, the things he did were just, again, there were certain games, back in the competitive days of 8-bit system, everybody's like, well, mine's bigger than yours. My Commodore's better than your Atari. My Atari's better than your Apple. There were certain games where you could show your douchebag friends on your CoCo and say, well, all of you guys can suck it, because look at this, I've got Zaxxon, So there were certain titles that made you proud of your color computer in public. You were always proud in private. You were a closet, coconut, but you could do like Rondo Vote, take this to a mall and show it to people and say, so look at this, bitches, we got Zaxxon, right? So
this great shot here, this is actually from one of the people that did buy stuff at Steve's estate sale, because there was multiple people. The estate sale lasted from a Thursday to a Saturday, and I think I noticed it the Sunday night because people were already starting to post stuff. But this is some of the stuff that I don't think he's put this part up to auction yet, or maybe he did. I missed it, but
the whole thing seems like such a morbid vulture fest when you're.
Yeah, it is. I mean, because especially I was trying to get arrangements done between Michael Furman and myself, and one of the guys that had some of the discs. Could we at least copy some of the source code discs? Like you can sell them for whatever you want. I mean, it's a valuable thing. Being the originals from him, but we want to try to archive it for the thing, and he agreed to it. And the next day was up on eBay. So. obviously he was just milking me for, details or something. But anyway, he was very active in the Color America users group, and they were active with him, like I mentioned with Desert Rider. So this is actually from the 1987 CoCo County Fair that was ran there, and he actually had these in his possession. So these are just some of the the first, second, and third place ribbons that he was giving out. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I wish things that, especially with I wish we'd known first of all that it had happened back in April, or
Yes.
that he was getting that bad. And I wish that his final wishes that he published in July 2021 had made it to estate lawyers, whatever, so that giving stuff to Glenside, which was his plan, would have actually happened too. Now it's a free for all. I will mention one of the people that bought some of the lots who picked up his CoCo 1 repackaged into a Model 3 case is planning on taking that computer to the SoCal Gaming Expo in Southern California, and he's
Okay.
actually going to have it as a display, so at least you can go see it.
Okay.
Cool.
So if anybody's in the LA area, that's happening in April, I think.
On that repack, the monitor came from well, it wasn't like a black and white TV. It was a what do you call it? The data terminal, and he made it so that he could send. I think it was hooked up to the serial port to make to do his his programming and stuff.
Cool. I've got some quotes here. I'm just going to start scattering in throughout there that were either on Discord or on Facebook too, from people that aren't on the show. I'll read 3 right now. From Mr. Dave 609, Steve Bjork loved the 689 CPU, which is a good thing because he sure programmed a lot of games on it. Right from the start of CoCo Gaming, I can remember seeing the dancing megabugs on the Radio Shack CoCos on display. Later on, I followed his assembly tutorials, and he even gave me some personal pointers on how to get my ship scrolling through deep space. It's sad we lost him so soon. He certainly won't be forgotten. And I think I'll intermix these with going through the panel here. So I think Mark, actually, we shifted around again. Mark Overholzer, do you have a particular favorite game that you've tried that Steve wrote?
Well. I'm not that much of a gamer, unfortunately. But and all the time spent talking with him and stuff and seeing all the various games he's done, it's like, wow, he definitely has tackled a lot of different genres, done a very good job, and especially hearing something like that stuff on, it's like, wow, he's a new programmer. It's like, you got to respect that. As Steve Jobs said, winners ship, and Steve Bjork did. So I was just impressed to meet him, actually, at the CoCo Fest in 2018, and then also he would hang out on Discord and the voice channels, and it's like you see all the hype, especially the misquote in the magazine about he's the best programmer, and it's like, that would kind of irritate me to know that. I'm saying, the best programmer is going to be me, and, my best programmer is going to be me in the future as I get better and more knowledgeable. So he really was, and again, he's probably mellowed with age, but he is much more humble from all the write-ups I've seen of him. So it was really nice getting to know the real him. So,
yeah,
anyway.
I agree. Since I'm next on the box,
I did play Rampage a little bit.
You did play? Okay.
I did play Rampage. I did play Rampage a little bit in at VCF West in 2019. So I did like that. It was cool.
Okay. Since I'm next on the boxes here, I'll do that, and then I'll read another one, and then we'll continue on from the people that have put in Facebook and on Discord. My favorite, that's a tough one, because there's a couple of them that I really, really enjoyed. Super Pitfall, just because it's such an expansive, large game, you keep yourself occupied for hours. Stellar Lifeline, because I like the original concept of it. Zaxxon, obviously, and Z89, the sequel. That's probably my favorites. I mean, I do like Rampage, but it's not a genre I play that often. Though I did appreciate the fact it supported 3 simultaneous players. So that would be my picks. One little quote here, and we'll get to Ken. So Salvadora Garcia said, "I'm grateful for the semi-language videos that Steve created for the show just a few years ago." That's the ones that are on the CoCo Talk section that Steve will be creating a separate channel for. So thanks for letting us know that. Ken Waters, what is your favorite? And I think you got a chance to interact with Steve on here a little bit?
Last time he was around was just shortly before I started getting really involved with everything. So I
Unfortunately, never did get to meet him, but probably my favorite game by him was one of the very first CoCo games I ever owned. When I got my very first CoCo 2, I got it with Stellar Lifeline, and I played the crap out of that, and I still play it. I've got like 4 copies of it now on cartridge. So, next one I'll read from the text ones from Damon Beals. He says, "I won't be able to join the show today, but I do want to say, like others, sad to hear about the passing of Steve. Megabug was one of the first games we had on the CoCo, and I played it for hours. If you saw a game that had his name on it, you knew it was going to be a fun game and worth the money I worked hard for. Sad the CoCo community did not find out about his passing sooner." And then, Steve, what is your favorite, you think?
It's hard to have a favorite. I mean, Zaxxon was
Or top 3 or something like I had to do too.
I would have to say Gana Buana, Zaxxon, and not Arkanoid's a great game, but it's just not my game. I'm not into Pong, no matter what you do to it, or Breakout. So I would say that's probably it. I would say, Pitfall, Pitfall 2.
Pitfall or Pitfall 2, because he did both.
Okay, Pitfall 2, Zaxxon, and Gana Buana would be my 3 favorites.
Okay. Next one, this is from Mark Segal that he posted earlier into the Discord. I'm very sad to hear about the loss of Steve Bjork. I introduced the CoCo to him, and then a short time later hired him to write software for the machine at Datasoft. Then after he left, I gave him Radio Shack projects to do. So we worked together for many years. That ended when he could not complete a project assignment, and for that, I am sad. Nevertheless, he was a very talented individual and someone who will be remembered. Being remembered for something you did in life is the greatest afterlife you can attain. Thank you, Steve. And of course, he's referring to The Last Ninja, which, pummeled a couple of CoCo programmers with ridiculous timelines. So next up, Bob Emery. What would your favorite be? And like I said, these don't have to be games. If you guys use Bjork blocks to design graphics or something like that, or color computer artists, you can include stuff like that as well.
All right. Well, basically, color computer one, is my audio coming through first of all?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Yeah. Basically, when I first got my color computer, I got Zaxxon on cassette. So obviously that was my #1 favorite. That's why I've got it playing on my CoCo one right here. But Zaxxon and Gana Buana, many hours. And then when I did get a CoCo 3, I played a lot of Rampage in the arcade, so I love that cartridge. I would say that's still one of my favorite CoCo 3 games today.
Okay. Next one from the text chat from Torston Cedo. Anyway, de mortulis nihil nisi bin. I have no idea what that means. It's probably Latin or something. He said, Steve Bjork was one of the guys who inspired many of us and made the CoCo special until today. I would say continuing to. And I'm glad he was not an untouchable superhero, but grounded himself by showing strength and weaknesses like all human beings share. I thought that was rather well put. Brian Wiesler.
Probably my favorite games. There's a common one you guys have been mentioning. That's Zaxxon, only because I played a lot of it in the arcade as well. So that's probably the one that I remember the most playing. And as far as any memories of him, I guess I never really had a lot of contact with him other than through the Discord. But I do remember driving back from one of the first CoCo Fest that I went to. It wasn't one that he attended. It was, I think, maybe the year after that. And there was a whole bunch of us on Discord just chatting and everything. And I think it was a late night drive for me. I want to say it was like 12:30 at night. And most of you had hopped off. And it was basically just Steve and I. And I think we talked for like a half an hour. And I don't remember what we talked about. It was just general conversation and stuff like that. And like a lot of you have said, he was just courteous with his time, and it was just a nice little pleasant conversation. So that's probably the main memories that I have of him.
Okay. Next one from the text chat from Christopher Perrault. I never got to know Steve, but I grew up on his games. I didn't realize he was part of the early homebrew club. Really sad milestone for all of us. Frederic, you probably haven't played too much CoCo stuff yet, so I don't know if you have a favorite one or even a favorite from the ones you've seen.
I have a favorite one from when I was young. It was Zaxxon, and I started to play a bit Zaxxon on a CoCo because I got my hands on a few now. But what I do have a small story to say. During COVID, when there was a lockdown, I was bored out of my mind and I needed to do something. And I remembered that in my college years, when I learned electronics, we programmed on the 6809. and I started to rewatch how to program again in assembler, and I came across Steve's assembly programming tutorial. I believe was it then, or was it a bit after that? And
no, that would have been out around that time.
Okay, and I remember because I just searched through it again, and I looked. Hey, I did watch all of these, and I was really mesmerized by the way he was teaching. And I think somebody mentioned in the panel that was this course, targeted at me directly. All of you talk, and it really makes me want to. I would have liked to have known him. He's good people, I think.
Yeah. Well, definitely, if you listen to those CoCo coordinated conference episodes that hopefully Tim will be hosting a bit later on, Steve's active in every single one of them. You'll get a lot of backstories and stuff here. So that's about the closest thing to a full interview we have. Okay. Aside from bits we had on our show as well.
A good place is episode 13. That was Steve's first episode, and there's a lot of good anecdotes there that I don't know if I had seen that one originally, but I did recognize a lot of the anecdotes in it, so I think they were repeated a few times, but it's a great place to start.
Yeah. One last one from the text from Jose Reece. He said he was an innovator, nice guy too. Met him at a CoCo Fest a few years ago. Rest in peace. Condolences to his family. Now we got Sloopy, so another newer to the CoCo person, and he is a bit of a game player because he's one of the head guys of our Game On Challenge live. You've had a chance to play some Steve Bjork games. I don't know if you've tried them all yet, but what has been your favorites there, Sloopy?
Honestly, I've not actually played all his games. I've played a good number of them, and they definitely run the gamut of the genres of games and such. And picking one is not an easy task because he set the bar pretty high for quality games with excellent gameplay, because obviously the graphics on the systems back then were not like what we have today. So you had to have your games much more reliant on the actual gameplay, the mechanics and such. And he definitely seemed to be someone who understood that and really made the CoCo shine with what it had to offer. I can't really pin down 1-2 games as my quote-unquote favorite, but I do know that I go back and play Stellar Lifeline quite a bit, and I have played the Zaxxon quite a bit. Unfortunately, I never got to meet the man himself in person, but I was able to interact and chat with him several times in the Discord, and I must say that it was a experience that I will treasure, especially chatting with him in the voice channel.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, that's all the text ones I had, so I'll keep an eye on the chat if anybody else mentions some other ones there too. But next on the list, they keep moving around on me here. So I guess Jason, you're next.
Okay, I'm next. Oh, yes, I'm next. It's exciting. Again, and I highly doubt I've played every Steve Bjork game on the color computer. Unlike I'm sure Curtis has. I'm sure they're all indexed on your site, right?
I don't know if I have them all up there yet.
I'm not even sure how many there are, but
break the internet if you pull them all up on one page.
But I'd have to say I can't pick one either. But some of my favorites, especially from back in the day, childhood memories of playing them. You have me bumping that. You have like Desert Rider. That like we brought that up earlier. That I still enjoy that game. That's a fun one. And everyone says Zaxxon, and I'm pretty sure, from my understanding, Steve didn't want to be known as the guy who wrote Zaxxon.
The guy who made Zaxxon.
As many times as that was referenced in jest, there's so much more of that. Not that it is a great game, and I love it. It's a great version for the color computer. And last but not least, I wouldn't say last. I can't really say in any order, but I always enjoyed Ghana Bawana.
I
I
did
even
too.
have one right here. I have it's actually still sealed, but with the comic book and everything in it.
Yeah.
And it's fun. It's a little hard, but it makes great use of the speech sound pack.
You're right. The natives say "ooga" when you shoot them.
Yeah, they say "ooga" because I remember having a conversation with Mr. Bjork on Discord, or I'm pretty sure it was Discord. You know, as many of the conversations as we all had with Steve, the line starts to blur. Well, did that happen on the show or did that happen on Discord?
Yeah,
I don't
right?
remember.
Yeah, exactly.
But one of the things was like, oh, what does the guy say when you get him with the arrow? Well, he says "ooga," and I added a word to it. And he's like, no, it just says "ooga." I'm like, okay. He's like, so be clear, but he was very clear. He's like, he's right. That's all the guy says is "ooga" when you shoot him with the arrow. But
Now, the comic book that came with that, I think, was done by the artist who was doing the Indiana Jones comic books for Marvel at the time, too. So it's a famous.
Yeah, it was a Marvel Comics artist that did
Yeah.
it. Just, Mark confirmed
actually,
that too.
Mark, if you're ready, we actually do have a clip about Ghana Bawana.
Oh,
Yes, we can.
Is this?
Are we
okay.
ready?
I feel a song coming on. The creator of Ghana Bawana, Steve Bjork, is with us. Hello, Steve.
Hey, everybody.
Thank you for a great game. Thank you for many great games. So we had an incredibly great game to play this week.
Uno, dos, 1, 2, 3, 4. Ghana Bawana. And a bearded jaw. Ghana Bawana. Ghana Bawana. Ghana Bawana. Ghana Bawana. Ghana Bawana. Booga Toruga. Let's don't take no chance. Grab all the big arrows. Shoot them in the pants. Ghana Bawana. Ghana Bawana.
Steve Bjork is here. This was Steve's game. Were you insulted or offended in any way by that?
The only thought I had is when we're developing this game, I never thought it would come to this. But one comment I bring up was all that beautiful artwork that you saw.
Mm-hmm.
That was done by the same guy that did the Indiana Jones comic book.
Yes, for Marvel Comics, yeah.
Yeah. Tandy was very. I remember Mark Segal goes, "We got him." I got who? We got the guy that did, the Indiana Jones comic book for Marvel.
Wow.
I think it was Marvel. And was there a problem game? Oh, we just had to pay him.
So what'd you guys think of the game? Keeping them under y'all throughs here.
Was any of the original code of Zaxxon reused in this?
Oh, God, yes.
Okay, and then another question was Congo Bongo an inspiration for this game?
We had to get all the concepts done so we could get the comic book done. But yes, I would say that as much as Zaxxon was an inspiration for Congo Bongo, it was the same thing. It's that, it's just that they were taking their engine, their stuff, and they put it in a new format. And we kind of did a similar thing. Similar, but not exact. By the way, this game did show up in an arcade cabinet.
Really?
Yep. The Color Computer Expo back in, I think it was 87. I took my Defender's machine and stuck a CoCo inside of it and modified it to go to the monitor. And so you got to play it in an arcade machine at the expo.
Wow.
Oh, that's cool.
And did you have the speech sound pack in there too for the full sound effects?
Yep. I mean, it's the CoCo fit very nicely in the bottom of the case.
Does anybody have any feedback on playing the game this week?
I just remember sucking at it back in the day.
I was going to say probably the number one complaint. It's too hard. I think one of the best compliments that I got was from Marty Goodman, where he said that in the design of my games, I try and make it so that the difficulty level builds slowly based on your skill. and two, that when you do die, I back off on the difficulty level, so it gives you a chance to get going again.
Mark Bosley, how about you?
Mark Bosley.
By the way, I have the GIMES episode of Guana Buana queued up if anyone wants to hear it.
Oh, the full version.
The full version. But as far as a Steve Bjork game, I mean, on Zaxxon, I could find level 2.
Level 2, is that when you're shooting the spaceships in outer space, or is it the second island where you have to go up and down through the laser shields?
Well, I could get to the part of shooting the ships in space.
Okay. That's
so
technically
level
between,
1.5.
That's between
One and
level
a
1.
Okay. I could
Again,
get that far.
this from our resident expert on level 1 of every game.
Ooh. I think my cholesterol is going up because somebody's a little salty today.
Where'd you come from?
Okay. Brian Schubring, you got your audio things fixed?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
And unfortunately, we can see it
excelente.
too.
Yes, I've been around. I've been just taking care of life things and all that. So,
well, since we just introduced you because you joined the panel, do you want to go next, and then we'll come back to David Ladd and Nick and the rest as to what your favorite
sure.
Steve Bjork program is?
I remember meeting Steve at one of the real early CoCo Fest way back in the day in the 90s, I think.
Yeah, he was at a few of them in the 90s. I remember.
Yeah,
I met him
I remember that. I think Zaxxon was the best one that I like to play in that. I'm not a big gamer, but that was one of the more fun ones. So,
okay.
Yeah,
cool.
I've had some memories of Steve. I didn't really get involved a whole lot with him, but he's always been very knowledgeable of what he does.
Didn't he make some kind of an audio thing, or was going to make it, and did that intrigue you at all?
Oh, that was the audio spectrum analyzer?
No, after that. He had mentioned the DAC and wanting to have something that he would put together. That was in the episode 13.
I can't recall. I remember that he wanted to do a repatch of that for the CoCo 3 because it only worked on the CoCo 1 and CoCo 2, the audio spectrum analyzer, properly. I know there is a patch now for the 3, but
okay. How about Mr. David Ladd?
Ooh.
Thank God he didn't write
Hello.
Predator, right?
Well, yeah, because Steve would have definitely heard that comment from me. But well, let's see here. I had several. So on the CoCo 1 and 2, Guana Buana and Zaxxon. On the CoCo 3, it would have been Super Pitfall. And the other stuff that I was appreciative of Steve was his times that he spent talking with me in Discord on assembly and his hacker stuff. CoCo Fest 2018, when he gave me my first SSD, he was very adamant about making sure I upgrade to SSDs. And we sat down and chatted about stuff then, and he made me feel very welcome, and he was always nice to me. That was, going to be a hard person to replace.
Yeah, agreed. Nick Marentes, you actually worked with him kind of through GamePoint software, and you started selling your software in the States, which also involved Pete Ellison, which was at the time his brother-in-law. So
that's right. Yeah. No.
Go ahead.
Sorry. What were you saying?
I was just going to say you've got a couple of angles here, like maybe some favorite Steve programs or games, but also you actually got to talk to him, and you actually have some recordings of conversations. Now, unfortunately, the audio is pretty bad in them, so we're going to have to really try to clean them up before we ever try to play them in public. But you actually had some phone conversations mostly with Pete, setting up the stuff with GamePoint software. But you also got to talk to Steve for an extended period of time on the first one, and you guys got to chat about the CoCo market in general and all kinds of things. So you have a couple of angles to approach of memories with Steve.
Well, basically, Steve, even before I got to talk to him, Steve, what I classify as a professional commercial game developer for the CoCo. I thought he was the standout. He was the rock star game developer for the CoCo back in the day. His name would appear in rainbows. His games all had his name on it. You knew when you saw his name on it that the game would be a polished game. It would be very well done. Now, the people who know me know that I'm pretty critical of a lot of CoCo 2 games. I sort of am pretty fussy and think, oh, that doesn't look good. That
Nah,
graphics
you?
good and all that. Yeah, they are surprising as I know. But Steve had polish. He was a professional. He knew how to develop software for a large company. He worked within the requirements needed for the end product. In other words, writing a game to fit into a game cartridge where you have limitations on how much memory space you can make it. He was able to do everything, on a ROM cart. He wrote to deadlines. He knew that in order to produce software rapidly for the commercial market that was being demanded by Radio Shack or even Datasoft before that, he knew that the best thing was to develop libraries to reuse bits of code that he had developed in previous games, so that, again, he ended up with a very rapid development and very professional. You could always tell a Steve Bjork game because a lot of them did have similar sound effects and the style of the presentation, like the title pages and all that, were common. And some people would say, oh, he doesn't really do anything that's really groundbreaking. Well, that's just it. He wasn't really a person who would just sit there and just spend years trying to make a brilliant program. He knew he had a month or 2 or 3 or whatever, and he had to develop a product. He had to supply a product, and he knew how to work to that deadline, and he knew how to make it very professional. So his game stood out. And even me back in the day, even though I never met him and everything by that time, he was the rock star of the CoCo programming world. And then eventually for me, where you were saying I spoke to him on the phone, my own software was starting to be distributed by GamePoint Software by the end of the 80s. And that was run by Peter Ellison, who was, as you said, that at the time was Steve Bjork's brother-in-law. So with no internet back in the day, the only way to communicate with GamePoint Software was by phone call. And he would ring me, luckily, because it would have been very expensive for me to dial the US at that time. We're talking roughly 1988. And the first time he rang me, Peter Ellison, to talk to me about business, let's say, he also had Steve Bjork. And luckily, I actually had the ability to record a phone conversation, and I did actually record that whole phone conversation. And that was when I first, in quotes, met Steve Bjork, and we spoke for about half an hour. I mean, I don't know how much the phone bill cost, but Peter was paying, and that's where I got to meet the CoCo rock star, and even to this day, he's still, well, up till his last days, he still was really the CoCo rock star. So it was a sad loss, but life happens, I guess.
And do you have a favorite game or two from him, or?
I wouldn't call it a favorite as such. I thought all his games were good. But again, I'm a stickler for the presentation and the quality and everything from Clowns and Balloons to Zaxxon were, in my opinion, were very good quality. He had a very good attention to detail in all his games. If I was to say which one do I think is the most visually impressive, maybe for back in the CoCo 1 and 2 ones, Zaxxon, obviously. It's the one that stands out in everyone's minds because of the 3D and all that. But all his games were really good quality. Everything from clowns and balloons and popcorns and everything. One thing I will say, though, that back in the early days, before when I started off as a TRS-80 Model 1 programmer, and I was switching off that to go to a color computer, to another color machine. I looked at the color computer first. Being a Tandy guy, I thought that was the obvious move. But I didn't really like the color computer because, well, over here we didn't have artifact colors. So all these games that used P Mode 4 were terrible. They looked terrible color-wise. So I wasn't impressed. Zaxxon and all those were the most impressive, and Donkey Kings and all that, but they looked awful because of the lack of artifact colors. So that didn't impress me, and I was veering away from the color computer until I saw Spectrum Analyzer by Steve Bjork, the cartridge, and I saw 8 colors, black background. I thought, hang on a second. So the color computer can do color, reasonably high res graphics.
Black border too, Nick.
Yeah, black border too. So seeing that cartridge, I thought, well, yeah, Steve Bjork as well. It's surprising, and that got me interested in the color computer again. And that's why I've of all the programs I've written, I've never done a P Mode 4 black and white game because I always wanted to try get color into the game. And when I did my first color computer game was a semi-graphics game, Neutroid, one of the best programs ever created, as you know, Curtis.
I just shuddered.
We couldn't go one show without Neutroid, could we?
That's right. I got it in. So that was my first CoCo game, and it did use semi-graphics, and it's seeing the Spectrum Analyzer is what convinced me to go to the color computer after all. I mean, if it wasn't for that, I would have probably looked at getting, I don't know, Commodore 64 or some of those lesser machines, So,
Nick, maybe you kind of already answered the question by what you were just sharing with us there, but as a
yes,
programmer...
Neutroid really is one of the best games. I agree.
Can somebody mute him already? No.
And maybe it's Spectrum Analyzer, or maybe it's Zaxxon, but was there anything that you saw from Steve Bjork as a programmer yourself that, like, wow, and you scratching your head trying to figure out how did he do that? How did he pull that off? Was there anything that really jumped out at you that you remember?
Well, yeah, one of the main thing with all his programs is he did do the sound effects didn't pause the graphics. It flowed, the graphics flowed smoothly, and yet he did have some fairly good sound effects, which were more than just a beep and all that, which what a lot of the CoCo games were doing back then. He did actually multitask the graphics and the sound professionally. You'd almost think the CoCo did have a sound chip, but you could see from that point he knew what he was doing when he was programming. The frame rate of his games were all consistent, so he knew how to time it with the vertical syncs correctly. It was just, like I said, it's the polish of all his games. And Zaxxon stood out because of the 3D and all that. But yeah, he had good graphics in most of his games.
Okay, cool. Before I get to Grant here, I got a couple more contributions from the chat here. So George Jansen, who's currently doing the new CoCo 3 assembly language series, he says his favorite program was Bjork Blocks, which is the screen and tile editor. Dave Verry says some old CoCo games really hold up today. Megabug and Donut Dilemma. Oh, geez, he's plugging Nick again. Would be great app games. And he also mentioned earlier that Z89 was very impressive. I think he took a bit more time to show off on that one, and I agree. Grant, Leighty, your turn.
Greg.
Hey, what's up, guys? So I actually remember Steve Bjork for the first time. It was the first time I ever went to CoCo Fest, which was back, I want to say it was 2006 when we were still in over there at the Holiday Inn. I can't remember the name.
Elgin?
Elgin, thank you. Yeah, and then he gave a big speech about making emulators and saying that's going to be the new way to work on the CoCo was doing an emulator because the hardware is starting to get harder and harder to find. So that's how I remember him for the first time. And then, of course, I met him with everybody else back in 2018 at that CoCo Fest. I enjoyed going to the arcade with him as well. That was a lot of fun. And my favorite memories of him is just, late at night, was bored and decided to get on Discord and just listening to his stories that he would just tell everybody on Discord, while we were listening and so forth. So very nice guy. I had no problems with him, but he'll definitely will be missed. My favorite games was Megabug. I loved that game. It was a lot of
Which
fun.
surprisingly, he hated it.
Yeah, I know, right?
I think he disliked color. He disliked color computer artists more though.
True.
Yeah.
And then Zaxxon, of course, and then Rampage was my favorite CoCo 3 game. So
I know those late night Discord chats. The fun part was it wasn't just CoCo. He would talk about the history of computers through the old computer fairs up in the San Francisco area, or he'd talk about Disney, or he'd talk about sometimes it'd be politics or whatever. I mean, you just had general flowing conversations on every subject under the sun if he happened to be on that evening.
Yeah, he was a big fan of Disneyland, California's Disneyland. He talked about that all the time and how fond he was of going there and how he somehow had a relationship with the Imagineers who worked on the rides and the technology and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I was hoping Alan Huffman would be here because that's a shared passion that they both had. And they used to go meet and go through Disneyland. And Steve knew some of the people there still, and he would take Alan and show behind the scenes stuff and things like that. So I was really hoping to.
Didn't
I was
Disneyland?
on
Didn't they?
once- He talked about the animation of the different characters in one section of.
Yeah,
Pirates of the Caribbean or something, I think it was.
Yeah.
Didn't OS9 sink the pirate ship for years?
No, that was at the Vegas pirate.
Oh, that was
show.
at the Vegas thing. Okay.
Was it the Bellagio? I can't remember which one it was now, but yeah, because Alan had his Disney fans website that he did for years too, and he used to go meet Steve down there. They would both go down and visit people and take a look at the way things were done behind the scenes and stuff. And he was hoping to make it onto the show today too, but apparently wasn't able to make it either. And we're on to the last one on the panel here, Henry. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, how's that?
Yeah,
Can you hear
I
me?
can hear you now.
Beautiful. Yeah, sorry. Hopefully my bandwidth holds out because it's been going all wonky. But yeah, really, the name Steve Bjork is my early childhood. It's I never actually got to meet him because by the time I got out of the CoCo scene, I didn't get back into it until a couple of years ago. But Popcorn. That's probably the first game that I remember playing on the TRS-80 color computer is Popcorn. And definitely Zaxxon. And I mean, just about everybody's going to say Zaxxon. But the one thing that I still remember to this day about Zaxxon is why are the explosions showing that they're worth 25 points and they're not? There's a 25 right there in those explosions. Look at them. It's a 25.
I'd have to take a look at that. I don't recall seeing that.
It's in the pixels. It's something that my eye catches on to. So it may or may not actually be a thing that everybody notices.
Okay. I don't see any other ones in the chat. I did want to share a couple of other things here. So I think it was 2007, I believe, Mary Kramer, who'd kind of joined the CoCo community after inheriting her late father's CoCo stuff, and she got quite involved for a while. She actually started running the Coconuts newsletter / magazine, and she did an interview with Steve in May 2007. So I thought I'd sort of screenshot. That's actually got some screenshots of the two of them talking during the interview and some screenshots of his games and stuff too. So let me share my screen again.
Is she still around? Alive?
We've been trying to see, I know she had kids and stuff, so she might have just gotten too busy with real life. But none of us have actually really talked to her in years now, I think. But it's nice. If you go in the Color Computer Archive, these are all archived there too, and it's the specific issue that I'd mentioned there, the May 2007, Volume 3, Issue 2, that she does the interview with Steve, and that was actually at a CoCo Fest, I believe. But you got some pictures of the games itself, and then the two of them talking here with Steve, obviously on the left here, and talking about the early days of the computer fair up in the San Francisco area, what we talked about earlier with Steve, Jobs and Steve Wozniak and a bunch of the big hitters from the earliest times. Talks about his early using stuff as a teen. Talking about his early, working with the Model 1 with the light pen and some of the games that he started on there. Yeah, West Coast Computer Fair. It's a pretty lengthy interview, actually. Here's one Spaceball, one of these earliest games on the Tier City Model 1.
There's the light pen.
Yep. Now there is he did have some discs with light pen for the CoCo. Now there was a few light pens sold for the CoCo that I know of. Spectrum Projects, Bob Rosen's company sold one. I don't know if that one of those was Steve's because I never had a light pen. I don't know if anybody here in the panel did, but I'm not sure which one he did. And then I think that's the end of the interview there. Yeah, that's the interview there. So there's a couple pages of interview from Mary. That was a really, really nicely done interview. Very well presented. Her whole newsletter was awesome, to be honest.
It's another nugget in the time capsule.
Who did you say her husband was?
I have no idea who her husband was.
Oh.
Her father was active in the CoCo community when he lived in Florida.
Oh,
but then he, I think, I don't remember the details, but I think he died of nefarious means type thing. 2 little bits. I want to show some of my Steve Bjork collection stuff here. I didn't find everything, but I got a fair bit. So for those who are not seeing it, here's the Clowns of Balloons cartridge. Canyon Climber, where he was kind of an uncredited assist.
Where's my mouse?
Ken and a bunch of others' favorite game. Another favorite for others for the CoCo 3.
Super Pitfall. I don't deny the technical achievement of it. It just wasn't my favorite game.
Yeah, Arkanoid, which Steve mentioned, is just a glorified breakout, but I quite like that one because you can shoot them.
It's a spot on. I mean, the sound effects were digitized from the arcade. So
there's a Rampage.
Yeah.
I do believe Arkanoid was his last project for Radio Shack anyway.
Popcorn.
Yeah. Popcorn, one of his earliest ones.
Yeah.
Shooting Gallery, where he had an uncredited assist on it. Huyan, which he also had an uncredited assist on it. I have a Zaxxon here. I couldn't find everything because I got stuff scattered all over the place. But
I wouldn't want to take color. I wouldn't want to take credit for that color set either.
And then some of the original discs, including Tandy stuff. So I've got Color Computer. I know that's going to show up here. Color Computer Artist. Here's the original Z89 I bought from him from Game Point. Ghana, you have to excuse the writing. I had a brief spite of my life there where I was writing stuff to number my discs and it wrecked it. Sorry. Warp Fighter 3D, which is still the best demo of 3D glasses on the CoCo.
Yeah. There's
the original Snake Pit.
Another genuine sticker.
Yeah, the original Mine Rescue. Sands of Egypt, which because it came with 2 discs when the package there, because it was copy protected, they wanted a backup so you had at least one working copy. You'll notice I cut the notch on it here and actually made it double-sided because that was my second disc. So I thought I could get a free disc out of it.
Made a flippy.
Yep. There's Bash. And then some of the original manuals. I couldn't find my Megabug cartridge, but there's the manual for it. Stellar Lifeline. Super Pitfall. And this is, of course, when they shrunk them down to cut the costs of putting stuff together.
Right, that's when I went to the blister pack instead of the silver box.
Yeah. Rampage there.
Roar.
Arkanoid there. Ghana Buana with the cover by the Marvel artist, and of course it has the actual comic book inside of it too.
Yeah, that's a cool.
There's the Color Computer Artist.
Artiste.
And then some of the stuff from Game Point. I've got like Mine Rescue. And Bash.
You can tell you're a pro because you know how to turn it just right so it can be seen.
Yeah, well, I'm watching the reflection here. There's a Snake Pit there, which is the last CoCo 1 and 2 game he ever did. Z89, where he got actually fancy with silver and color on the actual
silver
allure.
Warp Fighter 3D.
We just spent some
Pitfall
time
2
on
in
that.
its original package.
Nice.
Very nice.
One-on-one basketball in its original package.
Is he credited for that or is he uncredited for that?
No, he's mentioned on right on the
Yeah.
title screen.
Okay.
And then Sands of Egypt was a collaboration between three of them.
Yeah.
And of course, this got ported to other machines as well too from Datasoft.
Well, yeah, because Datasoft made multi-platforms
So
title.
roughly,
And this
half
one
the
was
Co-
what?
I was gonna say roughly half the CoCo games I've owned. You've just shown me. Steven Bjork.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
The funny
I think
thing
it
is
went-
like some of these, like Zaxxon and Puyan, Datasoft sold directly, and they were good enough they actually pressed Radio Shack to get the exclusive rights, and then they only got sold to Radio Shack. Unfortunately, they did drop the disc versions of those then because Datasoft had disc versions, and Tandy only sold the cassette one. But this is one where they actually, it was a disc game, and they actually
Yeah,
put it
there's
onto
no
the
way you
CoCo
could do
sold
that
directly.
game off a cassette.
Did you put holes in that to put it in a binder?
Yeah, like I said, I went through a thing where I was trying to organize things. So I was like numbering disc jackets and disc covers and stuff. And I really wish I had not done that in retrospect, but too late now.
Organization's really overrated.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I wanted to do is because this is going to kind of tie in the fact that
Although
I'm working
Curtis,
on a new...
I have a copy of Sands of Egypt too that has the holes in it already.
Oh, it might have,
Oh,
it might
okay.
have been,
I thought I
it might have
punched
been
it in
Bowner.
myself, but maybe I did.
Okay.
Maybe that was just the Canadian version. Those are metric punch holes.
And an unopened copy of Pitfall too, or Super Pitfall.
Lister.
I'll take your
$29.95
unopened.
from Radio Shack.
Hey.
Oh, that's like the original price here. I picked
Yeah.
mine up during the fire sale at Rainbow Fest.
I'll take your unopened Pitfall and raise you an unopened Ghana Bawana, right?
Right. So that one is Super Pitfall's the one with the gun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it was also on the NES and one other obscure machine, I think.
yeah, so that was like one of the early launch titles for the CoCo 3 when it first came out. And not knowing anything about hardware and how things what you have to do to manipulate a screen, I was not impressed with it compared to Super Pitfall. Or what's the CoCo 2 version? Is that Pitfall 2?
Pitfall 2 is the CoCo 2 version. Super
So
Pitfall's CoCo 2.
Pitfall 2 and the CoCo 2 was full screen, everything scrolled, there was music, and then this one is in like a little window. It's like 1/8 of a screen, and it seemed really slow. So when I first saw that, I'm like, man, compared to the other one that was full screen and scrolled smoothly in all directions, this thing is a slow, jerky, small screen game. And having that be one of the earliest CoCo 3 games I ever seen, I was not impressed. Now, of course, I don't know anything about what it takes to how we went from a 6K screen to a 32K screen and this and that and the other and anything else like that. I just kind of judged it based on what I saw. And initially I wasn't impressed. But I played it later on. I've learned to appreciate it. It's a large scale game, but compared to its predecessor, it felt very underwhelming to me. It just felt really slow and chunky how it moved,
I would actually agree with that. It is a bit slow. It did have background music without needing a cart, though, which was also a feature that had. And to be honest, when Sockmaster went in and 639ized it, like some of the games I've been doing, he was the first one to do that. It became much more playable.
Right, and I think that's the one I ended up playing. I found one somewhere and I did a video on it and not even knowing what version I had. But I think I ended up playing one where I had pretty much infinite lives and it was better and smoother. And I think he ended up commenting on that video saying, yeah, that's probably the one I optimized. I'm like, okay, yeah. But yeah, I just remember at first not knowing any better. I'm like, yeah, no, this is, I'm not that impressed. And it's
You could turn the music off though, and it got
and I think he said that did speed it up like 20% or something. And like Rampage is an incredible game, and it's like spot on. The RGB colors are spot on. The animation, everything is perfect. But Rampage was just never my favorite game. So when you say what's your favorite Stevie Bjork game, as much as I'm not trying to dismiss the technical prowess and the technical achievement of creating Rampage on the CoCo 3 to the level he did, it just wasn't my cup of tea, And Arkanoid I love. On Arkanoid on the CoCo 3 is pretty much arcade exact, but just again, not my favorite game. I think what was most impressive is at the time when the CoCo 1 and 2 did not have a lot of AAA titles. Datasoft and Steve Bjork were bringing them to us, and so they were bringing like AAA type stuff. Obviously, the licensed stuff like Zaxxon and Puyan, but even things like Popcorn and Clowns and Balloons were still, in my opinion, AAA title quality games on the CoCo 1 and 2 at a time when where not every CoCo 1 and 2 game was gold. You know, there was a lot of silver and bronze out there. So they were always gold on that machine.
Now listen though, you know, we have our down under guy here with his Ferrari. I wonder what Steve drove.
Well, one of them was a four-wheeler.
One was his dad's car when he went up to the West Coast Computer Fair, skipped school on Fridays.
And I think we can say that. I think we can say that Steve Bjork never rode a Neutroid either.
No.
I couldn't resist.
Anyway, the last thing I wanted to show myself, and then I'm done as far as I'm planning on going. If you guys have any last thoughts, we can add them in afterwards. But he also did a bouncing ball demo for level 1 OS9 on the CoCo. And sneak peek, it's going to be included with the next version of EOU, so you can give it a shot. And this VCC that I've got right now occasionally crashes, so I'm hoping it doesn't do it this time, but we'll see.
Don't forget to share sound.
There's no sound in this one, so it wouldn't matter.
All right. SRB, you have SRB's balls?
Yeah, his regular fast and slow ones.
All right.
Yeah, Stevie, you're really here to class up the joint,
Yeah,
aren't
listen.
Hey, Stevie didn't bring that up.
Look at that. That's almost like the Amiga thing. And this is like a wireframe version of that.
Yeah, and this is a CoCo 1 and 2 program. I haven't run it under EOU, which is CoCo 3, but this was a CoCo 1 and 2 one.
Yeah, that's a beauty.
So he's got smooth scrolling text as well as a pretty fast ball. And basically you had a parameter where you could set the speed of the ball if you wanted to slow it down. But this is one of the, like, he didn't do too many games on OS9 for the CoCo 3. He did more, applications like Color Computer Arts, etc. And but this kind of showed that he could have. And of course he did work in Last Ninja and did get it far enough to do a demo that he actually brought to the fest the one year, and Alan Huffman recorded some video off of it. But
he deserves a Lamborghini.
Yeah.
Well, one of the very few people in the CoCo community over the years, besides maybe like Greg Zumwalt, Lonnie Falk, and a few others, that actually he made his living off the CoCo for a decade. I don't think any of the rest of us can say that. So not even Nick with all of his, Ferraris and stuff can say that.
Well, I use the CoCo in my business, so it, it helped me until I got my IBM PC stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we used it at work. I'm not saying it, not using a CoCo to do the business stuff, but to actually make your living off programming for the CoCo. I don't know too many people that fall into that category, especially as long as he did. Anyway, that's all I've got. Any last minute thoughts from the chat or last minute thoughts from the panel? And then we'll have a break.
I think I saw a couple comments in the chat.
Okay, rattle them off there, Mark.
Oh, now I got to go scroll back and find them.
So Mark Segal mentioned Dallas Quest. Was Steve Bjork credited with that, or did he have his hands on Dallas Quest?
No, he didn't do that one.
No, I think Steve had already left Datasoft by the time that one came out, because his name's not on the credits on that one.
Did Frederic speak?
Yeah.
I must have missed that one. Went to the.
It was when you nodded off there.
Yeah. Pit stop.
George GBJanssen said his favorite was Bjork blocks.
Yeah, I did mention that one.
Yeah, it was mentioned, which that was George's favorite one. And let's see what else. I think Mark Segal said something about something that Steve did.
I'll just mention while you're looking that up here, Daddy Burrito says, I mentioned this before, but I will never forget the first time I met Steve. So it was at my first Rainbow Fest, and Steve and his girlfriend were dressed up in Star Trek Next Generation Federation uniforms. That was Monique, who also did a lot of the graphics for his CoCo 3 stuff. Yeah.
Mark says he did do some work on Dallas Quest.
I don't know. Where's our resident Dallas Quest expert, David Ladd?
Also, Mark Segal said earlier, did Steve ever bring up that he liked Greek food? Scott Cooper said his favorite Steve Bjork game was Stellar Lifeline and Zaxxon. I'm not sure if he did Canyon Climber.
Well, I have a feeling that pretty much does it for the show, unless anybody's got something that's just burning to get in here. Crickets, crickets, crickets. Okay, we'll leave it at that and put this puppy to rest because we're over 3 hours. Why don't we go ahead and do that exit video, and we'll say our goodbyes.
This concludes another episode of the CoCo Nation, the world's leading live interactive talk show featuring the Technicolor computer. For all things the CoCo Nation, visit us on the web at thecoconation.com. We'd love to hear from you. Send feedback, suggestions, even segments via email to show@thecoconation.com. The CoCo Nation Show would not exist without the community and its cast and crew. The CoCo Nation theme song, copyright 2022, D. Bruce Moore. Mixed, mastered, and produced by D. Bruce Moore. The CoCo Nation is over. Join us on the CoCo Discord server. CoCo forever.